In a world where the boundaries between fiction and reality blur, a hypothetical battle erupts between the real-world military and the Marines from the One Piece universe. The clash would be an intense showdown, where real-world tactics and technology would meet the extraordinary powers of the Marines, creating a fascinating and unpredictable confrontation. This battle would not only showcase the limits of human strength and strategy, but it would also highlight the unique abilities granted to the characters in the One Piece world. The real-world military, comprised of the armed forces from modern-day nations, relies heavily on advanced technology, strict training, and tactical operations to ensure national security and combat effectiveness. With a vast array of military units, the real-world military can mobilize everything from infantry soldiers to fighter jets, tanks, naval fleets, and unmanned drones. Additionally, the military's ability to execute coordinated operations through intelligence and satellite surveillance plays a major role in its overall strategy. In this hypothetical battle, the military would likely bring its modern weaponry into play. Air superiority could be achieved through stealth bombers and fighter jets, while ground and naval units would employ heavy artillery, tanks, and advanced ships. The military's strategy would involve gathering intelligence, utilizing cyber warfare, and focusing on precision strikes. However, despite these technological advantages, the real-world military would face significant challenges in the battle against the Marines from One Piece, whose strengths extend far beyond the capabilities of any real-world force. In the One Piece universe, the Marines are the central military force of the world government. These Marines are known for their unwavering loyalty to the government and their ability to maintain order across the Grand Line and the world. Unlike the real-world military, the Marines in One Piece possess access to powers that transcend typical human limitations. The Marines are led by powerful figures like Admiral Akainu, Aokiji, and Kizaru, each of whom commands devastating abilities that could give them an edge over traditional military forces. One of the most significant factors in the Marines' power is the widespread use of devil fruits. These mystical fruits grant individuals extraordinary abilities that can manipulate natural elements, enhance physical abilities, or grant near-immortal traits. For example, Admiral Akainu wields the Magma fruit, giving him the ability to create and control magma. Meanwhile, Admiral Aokiji possesses the Ice fruit, allowing him to freeze entire landscapes. Such powers would be difficult for the real-world military to counter. Additionally, the Marines often work with Haki, a mysterious power that enhances combat abilities. Observation Haki allows users to sense the presence of others and predict movements, while Armament Haki enables them to strengthen their physical strikes, even against devil fruit users who are otherwise invulnerable to physical attacks. Conqueror's Haki, on the other hand, is a rare power that allows the user to exert dominance over others, potentially incapacitating weaker-willed enemies. Such abilities make the Marines formidable opponents, capable of taking on entire armies with relative ease. With these capabilities, the Marines would not only rely on their traditional weaponry and strategies but would also incorporate their elemental and supernatural abilities into the battle, making them an unpredictable and dangerous force. The initial stages of the battle would see both sides testing each other's strategies. The real-world military, with its superior technology, would likely attempt to overwhelm the Marines with a barrage of long-range artillery, fighter jets, and warships. The vast technological superiority of the real world would make it seem like a one-sided affair at first, with the military attacking from the air and sea to keep the Marines at bay. However, the Marines' ability to manipulate their environment would quickly level the playing field. Admirals like Akainu and Aokiji would use their devil fruit powers to neutralize the real-world military's attacks. Akainu's magma could melt artillery shells mid-air, while Aokiji could freeze entire fleets in their tracks, rendering the military's naval ships and aircraft ineffective. As the battle escalates, the military's reliance on technology could become a liability, as their precision strikes may be evaded or countered by the Marines' superhuman abilities. Moreover, the Marines' use of Haki would be a significant advantage against the real-world military. Observation Haki would allow the Marines to anticipate and avoid attacks, while Armament Haki would make them immune to the military's conventional weaponry. A soldier's bullets, for example, would have little effect on the Marines if they are coated in Haki. This would force the military to shift tactics and resort to heavy weaponry, such as guided missiles or specialized weapons capable of piercing even the toughest of defenses. The Marines' strategic thinking would also be a key factor in their success. Unlike the rigid tactics of the real-world military, the Marines are accustomed to dealing with unpredictable and high-stakes situations. They would not hesitate to adapt to changing circumstances, using their environment to their advantage and employing their devil fruit abilities creatively to disrupt the enemy's plans. Another aspect of the battle would be the role of terrain. The Marines are no strangers to diverse environments, having operated in countless locations, from the scorching deserts of the Grand Line to the frozen wastelands where Aokiji resides. On the other hand, the real-world military would rely heavily on terrain to create advantages in the battle. In urban environments, the real-world military would utilize their expertise in house-to-house combat, as well as intelligence networks to guide their movements. However, the Marines' devil fruit powers could give them an edge in this setting. For instance, Admiral Kizaru, with his light fruit ability, could move at the speed of light, rendering conventional military tactics useless in confined spaces. His ability to launch beams of light could obliterate any obstacles in his way, overwhelming military personnel with rapid and precise attacks. In open fields or mountainous regions, the military's air superiority would come into play. Fighter jets could launch strikes from above, while drones would scout the area, giving real-time intelligence on the movements of the Marines. Yet, even in these open settings, the Marines' diverse abilities would complicate things. For example, Admiral Akainu could create vast fields of lava, preventing the military from establishing any kind of foothold. The Marines' physical prowess combined with the environment would make it difficult for the real-world military to execute successful ground operations. One aspect of the battle that would favor the Marines is their psychological edge. The Marines are trained to remain unwaveringly loyal to the world government and are often accustomed to intense and dangerous combat situations. However, their true strength lies in the larger-than-life personalities of their leaders, such as Sengo, Garp, and the enigmatic figures of the Shichibukai, 7 warlords of the sea. These characters, with their fierce reputations and legendary statuses, would no doubt intimidate the real-world military. The military, by contrast, would rely on their own psychological warfare tactics, such as propaganda and disinformation, to weaken the resolve of their opponents. Their commanders would likely attempt to undermine the morale of the Marines by launching disinformation campaigns or attempting to exploit any perceived weaknesses. However, given the Marines' unwavering resolve and strong leadership, such tactics might have limited effect on their determination to win. The ultimate outcome of this hypothetical battle would likely hinge on the adaptability of both sides. The real-world military, with its vast array of weapons and advanced technologies, would pose a significant threat to the Marines at first. However, as the battle progresses, the Marines' overwhelming superhuman abilities and unique powers would likely turn the tide in their favor. The combination of devil fruit powers, haki, and legendary figures would allow the Marines to dominate and counter the military strategies, making it exceedingly difficult for the real-world forces to gain a decisive victory. While the battle would be a hard-fought contest, the Marines from One Piece would likely prove to be the superior force, as they possess abilities far beyond the limits of conventional human capabilities. Nevertheless, the outcome remains speculative, with many factors, such as terrain, environment, and the ingenuity of both sides, playing a crucial role in determining the final victor. In the opening stage of this hypothetical battle, the regular soldiers from both the real-world military and the Marines from One Piece face off in an intense ground battle. While the Marines are known for their extraordinary abilities, this initial confrontation pits the everyday soldiers of each side against each other, with the distinct advantages of modern weaponry and military strategy from the real world clashing with the basic combat skills and primitive weaponry of the Marines. At this stage, the technological superiority of the real-world military would provide a significant advantage, allowing their forces to quickly overpower the more conventional, albeit formidable, Marines. The real-world military's primary advantage lies in its advanced weaponry and combat techniques, honed through years of development, innovation, and experience. Modern soldiers are equipped with cutting-edge firearms, explosives, and tactical gear designed for efficient combat in a variety of environments. Standard infantry in the real-world military are armed with assault rifles, machine guns, grenades, and precision-guided equipment. These soldiers also have access to vehicles such as armored personnel carriers, APCs, tanks, and drones, allowing them to maintain battlefield dominance. One of the most overwhelming factors in this initial engagement would be the firepower of the real-world military soldiers. In the face of massed, relatively primitive combatants like the Marines' standard grunts, the real-world forces would easily neutralize the threat with long-range gunfire, coordinated tactics, and superior logistics. A single infantry soldier from the real-world military, equipped with an automatic rifle, could outgun several of the Marine soldiers wielding basic swords, clubs, or primitive firearms. The real-world military's infantry tactics are also designed to maximize firepower and coordination. Soldiers would employ suppressive fire to pin down Marine forces, making it nearly impossible for them to advance or effectively counterattack. Tanks, armored vehicles, and drones would play a crucial role in suppressing enemy positions, ensuring that even the Marines' heavy hitters would find it difficult to navigate the battlefield unscathed. Furthermore, the use of grenades and explosive devices would prove incredibly effective against the Marines' ground forces. These explosives can clear large swathes of the battlefield in a single strike, reducing the number of Marines who can effectively engage in close combat. Since the Marine soldiers lack advanced personal armor and are not typically invulnerable to conventional weapons, the real-world military's explosives would devastate them from a distance, forcing the Marine forces into a defensive position. The Marines in One Piece are undoubtedly skilled and disciplined, but their standard ground forces are not equipped with the technological advantages of their real-world counterparts. Most Marines rely on basic swords, guns, or hand-to-hand combat techniques, which, while effective against pirates and other low-level foes in the One Piece universe, are relatively ineffective against the advanced weaponry of the real-world military. While many Marines have specialized powers or abilities granted by Devil Fruits, their regular soldiers often rely on traditional weaponry and combat techniques that would be overwhelmed by the real-world military's firepower. The soldiers of the Marines are also skilled in hand-to-hand combat, trained in various martial arts and enhanced by their combat experience in the Grand Line. They may wield swords, spears, and basic firearms, but these weapons, while potentially deadly in one-on-one combat, are no match for the technological firepower of the real-world military. In terms of pure weaponry, the Marine soldiers are simply outclassed. While the Marine soldiers do have some experience with combat tactics and fighting in diverse environments, their lack of armor or high-tech weaponry leaves them vulnerable to the real-world military's superior weapons. For instance, a Marine soldier with a sword could be easily outmatched by a real-world soldier armed with a semi-automatic rifle, capable of firing multiple rounds in quick succession. Even with their natural agility and strength, the Marines would struggle to get close enough to engage in hand-to-hand combat, as the real-world military would maintain a safe distance with overwhelming firepower. Furthermore, the Marines' forces are not accustomed to fighting against enemies with such advanced weaponry. While they may have faced pirates and other enemies with unique abilities, the regular soldiers in the Marines are not trained to counter the relentless, modern firepower of a real-world army. The Marines may lack the coordination and resources that the real-world military has, meaning their efforts to form battle lines or execute coordinated maneuvers would be disrupted by the sheer volume of incoming fire from the opposing forces. The real-world military strategy would be based on swift, overwhelming force. The use of reconnaissance and intelligence would allow the real-world forces to gather information on Marine troop movements, positioning themselves for the most effective strikes. The military would likely start by identifying and targeting the Marine commanders, taking out the leadership and disorienting the enemy forces. Modern military units are equipped with the ability to quickly respond to changes on the battlefield, which would give them a significant edge in the opening stages of the confrontation. Moreover, the real-world military's use of air superiority would play a crucial role in this stage of the battle. While the Marines have some formidable individuals, such as the powerful vice admirals, the standard Marines would struggle to deal with fighter jets that could provide close air support, launching airstrikes on Marine positions from above. The real-world military would maintain a tactical advantage by constantly shifting the battlefield in their favor, using air and ground units in concert to outmaneuver and overwhelm the opposing forces. On the other hand, the Marines would likely attempt to use guerrilla tactics, attempting to take advantage of the terrain and ambush the real-world soldiers in close quarters. The Marines' training in various combat environments, from jungles to deserts, would allow them to find ways to navigate through difficult terrain, potentially avoiding detection from the military surveillance. However, these attempts would likely be short-lived, as the real-world military's advanced satellite surveillance and drone technology would quickly detect any such movements. Though the real-world military holds the upper hand in this initial stage, the Marines would not simply lay down and surrender. They are well-trained soldiers, and some of them, like the elite CP9 or the SWORD division, would have more specialized skills and abilities that could surprise their opponents. These higher-level Marine units might use stealth or unexpected tactics to attack weak points in the real-world military's formation. Still, these tactics would struggle to overcome the technological and numerical superiority of the real-world forces. Even without advanced weaponry, some of the Marines would use their skill and combat training to try and sabotage the military's technology. For instance, a Marine soldier might attempt to disable a tank or take out a communications hub to disrupt coordination. These small victories, however, would be few and far between, and they would not significantly shift the momentum of the battle in the Marines' favor. The real-world military's response would be quick and adaptive. As the Marines began to use guerrilla tactics or attempt to sabotage key infrastructure, the real-world military would deploy specialized units to counter these strategies. Elite units like special forces and counterintelligence teams would target the Marines' leaders, neutralizing any key threats before they could take full advantage of their environment. The real-world military's organizational structure, with its reliance on communication and strategic coordination, would also help them mitigate any initial setbacks and ultimately maintain their advantage as the ground soldiers of both sides face off in this initial stage of the battle. The real-world military's technological superiority, combined with their tactical cohesion, would result in overwhelming success. The Marines' reliance on basic weaponry and hand-to-hand combat skills would be insufficient to counter the high-powered firearms, explosives, and modern warfare strategies employed by the military. The technological edge and extensive resources of the real-world military would prove to be too much for the Marines' standard infantry. While the Marines would fight valiantly, employing guerrilla tactics and utilizing their training to the best of their ability, the overwhelming firepower and precision of the real-world military would allow them to dominate the battlefield. The Marines would suffer heavy casualties, and their ground forces would be decimated in the early stages of the battle. However, this would only be the first stage of a much larger conflict, and the Marines' elite units and Devil Fruit abilities would soon enter the fray, signaling the start of a more unpredictable and intense conflict. In the end, Stage 1 would likely serve as a clear victory for the real-world military, demonstrating the massive disparity in firepower and technology between the two sides. But it would also be a reminder that, despite their technological superiority, the real-world military may soon face far greater challenges as the battle progresses and the Marines begin to unleash their more powerful assets. After the real-world military successfully overwhelms the standard ground forces of the Marines, the battle takes a sharp turn as the enhanced Marines with Devil Fruit powers and Haki enter the fray. These higher-ranking Marines, admirals, vice-admirals, and elite soldiers, bring with them unique abilities that tip the scales and transform the dynamics of the confrontation. Though they are still outnumbered by the real-world military, their extraordinary powers provide them with the means to challenge the technological superiority of the enemy. The key factor in the Marines' comeback during Stage 2 is the deployment of individuals who have consumed Devil Fruits. These mystical fruits grant their users a wide array of abilities, each capable of altering the battlefield in ways that modern military technology cannot easily counter. For example, Admiral Akainu, wielding the Magma fruit, gains the ability to create and control molten magma. This power alone allows him to melt through armor, vehicles, and even entire buildings. His ability to create molten rivers on the battlefield would render tanks and armored vehicles useless, as they would be slowly consumed by lava, incapacitating or destroying entire units. Similarly, Admiral Aokiji, with his Ice fruit, would freeze large sections of the battlefield, creating a deadly environment where soldiers from the real-world military struggle to maintain their footing. Large chunks of ice could be used as projectiles or shields, deflecting incoming gunfire and rendering the military's long-range weaponry ineffective. Aokiji could also freeze vehicles, including tanks and helicopters, with a single touch, rendering them useless for the real-world military. In addition to these two admirals, Vice Admiral Garp and Sengo, both formidable leaders within the Marines, join the battle. While not possessing the same type of Devil Fruit powers, they are both legendary fighters who rely on their own strength and combat skills. Garp, known for his ability to take on powerful pirates like Gol D. Roger, would be a devastating force in hand-to-hand combat, taking down enemy soldiers with precise and powerful strikes. Sengo, a master strategist and fighter, would bring experience and tactical brilliance to the battlefield, helping organize the Marines' forces into a more cohesive unit. Lastly, the Marines' use of Haki, a mysterious power that grants various abilities, provides another significant advantage. Armament Haki allows Marines to enhance their physical attacks and make themselves impervious to many of the military's weapons, including bullets and explosives. Observation Haki grants the Marines the ability to sense the presence of nearby enemies, predicting their movements and gaining a significant edge in avoiding gunfire or explosives. The Conqueror's Haki, a rare ability possessed by a few individuals in the One Piece universe, can incapacitate weaker enemies simply by exerting overwhelming willpower. The real-world soldiers would be at a massive disadvantage, especially if they encounter Marines who can use this power effectively. With these powerful individuals now engaging in the battle, the real-world military would face the first real challenge to their technological dominance. Despite the Marines' smaller numbers, the sheer destructive potential of their abilities levels the playing field, forcing the military to reconsider its strategy in response to the enhanced Marines. The real-world military shifts to a more robust approach, deploying its tanks, helicopters, and other heavy artillery. Tanks, already formidable against the Marines' lower-ranking soldiers, are now deployed in full force to face off against the enhanced Marines. Their armor-piercing rounds and heavy-caliber guns could inflict massive damage to enemy positions, and their mobility allows them to engage Marines in both urban and open terrain. However, while tanks are designed to dominate ground-based combat, they are no match for the Marines' superhuman abilities and Devil Fruit powers. Admiral Akainu's magma could melt through tanks with ease, and Aokiji's ice could freeze the vehicles solid, rendering them immobile. Even though the military may initially use its tanks to create formidable defensive lines, these machines would quickly become liabilities once the higher-ranking Marines enter the battle. Helicopters are also called into action to provide air support, using rockets and machine guns to engage the Marines from above. However, the Marines' abilities to use Haki and their exceptional speed give them the advantage in aerial combat. Marines with the ability to move at lightning speed, such as Kizaru, who has the light fruit, can easily evade incoming fire, making it difficult for the helicopters to target them. Moreover, the Marines' elite fighters would likely engage the helicopters in close-range combat, using their Devil Fruit abilities to bring the helicopters down before they can cause too much damage. At this stage, the real-world military is forced to adapt, focusing on countering the overwhelming power of the enhanced Marines with a mix of air superiority, strategic tank deployments, and advanced firepower. However, as Stage 2 progresses, the scales are tipping ever so slightly in the favor of the Marines, thanks to the entry of their most powerful figures. As the battle intensifies, the real-world military's next stage of combat employs its most powerful weaponry: fighter jets, bombers, and heavy artillery. These advanced tools of war, which allow for precision strikes from great distances, provide a significant advantage in terms of speed, firepower, and range. However, the Marines, relying on their most powerful individuals, are now engaged in a fight for survival, using every ounce of strength and strategy to hold their ground. In Stage 3, the real-world military goes all out with its air force. Fighter jets, capable of traveling at supersonic speeds, are dispatched to launch high-speed, high-precision airstrikes on the Marine forces. These fighter jets are equipped with guided bombs, rockets, and missiles that can target Marine positions with pinpoint accuracy. The military would also deploy bombers to launch heavy bombing raids on strategic targets, including Marine command centers, fortified positions, and large groups of Marines. Given the sheer scale and power of these airstrikes, the real-world military has the advantage in terms of range and speed. Fighter jets can engage the Marines from high altitudes, avoiding close-quarters combat and minimizing the risk of being countered by the Marines' Devil Fruit powers or Haki. The real-world military's ability to target large swaths of the battlefield with heavy bombing runs would force the Marines to retreat or adapt, as their limited numbers and powers make it difficult to deal with the overwhelming scale of destruction from the air. Tanks and infantry units would continue to provide support on the ground, but the real focus of the military in Stage 3 would be its air superiority. By targeting key Marine positions from above, the real-world military forces would hope to neutralize their most powerful figures or at least inflict enough damage to slow their advance. Faced with the overwhelming firepower of the military's air force, the Marines are forced to rely on their strongest individuals. With their superior mobility, durability, and combat prowess, these elite Marines, such as Akainu, Aokiji, Kizaru, and Sengo, enter the battlefield with full force. Their ability to alter the terrain, move at extraordinary speeds, and resist damage from conventional weapons gives them the tools they need to fight back. The Marine strategy at this stage is to divide their forces into smaller groups, with the elite fighters taking on the military's most formidable air units. Akainu and Aokiji would work together to manipulate the environment, creating large-scale obstacles to block the bombing runs, such as walls of magma or frozen terrain. Kizaru's ability to move at the speed of light would allow him to dodge incoming airstrikes and counterattack the fighter jets before they can retreat. Despite their immense power, however, the Marines are still at a disadvantage in terms of raw numbers and firepower. As the military continues to use its artillery to relentlessly pound the Marine forces, the Marines suffer heavy losses. The airstrikes decimate entire divisions of Marines, and while the elite fighters manage to evade some of the bombings, they are unable to protect every Marine on the battlefield. As a result, the Marines suffer significant casualties, even though they are still able to deal considerable damage to the military's forces. Stage 3 would see the real-world military pressing its advantage, using its superior firepower and range to target the Marines from the air, taking down their positions and reducing their numbers. While the Marines' strongest fighters would put up a fierce resistance, their efforts would be continually thwarted by the military's overwhelming range and speed. Despite their extraordinary abilities, the Marines would find it increasingly difficult to hold their ground. By the end of Stage 3, the real-world military would have inflicted significant damage on the Marines, causing them heavy losses. However, the Marines' elite forces would still remain a significant threat, and the battle would likely continue as the real-world military searches for ways to neutralize the remaining Marine threats. The clash between modern artillery and the Marines' supernatural abilities creates a tense stalemate, where both sides suffer casualties, but the outcome remains uncertain as they prepare for the final stages of the battle. The Marines, having suffered heavy losses in previous stages, receive a much-needed boost with the arrival of the Vice Admirals, some of the most powerful figures in the One Piece universe. With their advanced Haki abilities and Devil Fruit powers, these elite fighters bring a level of strength and strategy that dramatically shifts the tide of the battle. While the real-world military has been holding its ground with its superior technology and firepower, it now faces an even more formidable enemy in the form of the Marines' seasoned warriors. Vice Admirals are some of the most powerful figures in the One Piece world, sitting just below the Admirals in rank and possessing a wealth of experience and unique abilities. Many of them possess advanced forms of Haki, which allows them to enhance their physical capabilities or predict enemy movements. This makes them formidable opponents in any fight, as they can dodge bullets, counterattacks, and overpower regular soldiers with ease. For instance, Vice Admiral Smoker, known for his mastery of the smoke fruit, gains the ability to transform his body into smoke, allowing him to slip through barriers and avoid attacks. Smoker can also control the smoke he generates, creating powerful weaponized clouds that can incapacitate enemies by choking or trapping them. His Devil Fruit power, combined with his combat skills and Haki, makes him an especially dangerous adversary for the real-world military. Another key Vice Admiral, Monkey D. Garp's former partner Sengo, the Buddha fruit user, has the ability to turn his body into a giant golden Buddha, increasing his physical strength to extraordinary levels. With the addition of Haki, Sengo can fight on par with the most elite of warriors, and his sheer size and power allow him to deal with large groups of enemies in one fell swoop. These Vice Admirals not only provide a physical presence capable of overwhelming the real-world forces, but their tactical brilliance also serves as a countermeasure to the military's advanced technology. With the Vice Admirals now in the fray, the Marines gain a significant advantage. The military's reliance on technology and brute force, while formidable, is increasingly ineffective against these powerful individuals. The Vice Admirals are capable of dodging gunfire, avoiding explosions, and neutralizing tanks with ease due to their use of Haki. Additionally, their Devil Fruit powers further exacerbate the military's difficulty, as these abilities provide them with versatility that technology cannot match. Smoker's smoke clouds can create confusion and disrupt the military's communications, while Sengo's Buddha form can crush entire battalions under his immense size and strength. Despite this, the real-world military is not without its resources. The next stage of the battle sees them evolving their tactics in an attempt to exploit the inherent weaknesses of the Devil Fruit users. The real-world military, recognizing the overwhelming advantages of the Devil Fruit powers, adapts by focusing on water-based strategies. Most Devil Fruit users are vulnerable to drowning, as they lose their powers when submerged in water. This weakness gives the military a potential opening to counter the powerful Vice Admirals and their Devil Fruit abilities. To exploit this vulnerability, the military deploys naval forces, including ships, submarines, and amphibious vehicles, to engage the Marines in water-rich environments. The idea is to force the Devil Fruit users into situations where their powers would be neutralized. For instance, if Smoker is forced to fight in a large body of water, his smoke-based powers would be rendered ineffective, leaving him vulnerable to traditional weaponry. Similarly, Sengo's ability to fight on land would be limited if he were forced to fight in a marine environment, where his size and power would be less effective. The real-world military also begins using water cannons and high-pressure jets to push the Devil Fruit users into water, ensuring they can no longer rely on their abilities. While this does not completely negate the threat of the Vice Admirals, it does provide the real-world military with a method of weakening the Marines' advantage and balancing the scales once again. As the battle continues to escalate, the real-world military faces its greatest challenge yet with the arrival of the Marines' strongest fighters, Garp and Sengo, both legendary figures in the One Piece world. These individuals are not only formidable in combat, but they also bring decades of experience and unmatched strength to the battlefield, giving the Marines the upper hand once again. Despite the military's technological superiority, Garp, known as the Fist of Justice, is a living legend within the Marines, feared and respected across the seas. As one of the strongest characters in the One Piece universe, Garp possesses immense physical strength and unparalleled fighting prowess. Although he lacks a Devil Fruit power, Garp's mastery of Haki allows him to enhance his physical capabilities and deliver devastating blows that can shatter even the toughest of opponents. Garp is also known for his ability to take on powerful opponents such as Gol D. Roger, the former Pirate King. His raw power and fighting experience allow him to go toe-to-toe with the most formidable adversaries, and his presence on the battlefield would quickly turn the tide against the real-world military. Armed with nothing but his fists, Garp would tear through enemy lines with ease, devastating soldiers and vehicles alike. His ability to unleash powerful Haki-enhanced punches that can level buildings and create shockwaves would be a nightmare for the real-world military. As Garp enters the battlefield, he quickly establishes himself as a force of nature, clashing with tanks, helicopters, and infantry. His indomitable will and fighting spirit inspire the Marines, boosting morale and allowing them to regroup and counterattack more effectively. Despite the overwhelming firepower of the military, Garp's sheer strength and fighting ability are enough to turn the tide in favor of the Marines. In addition to Garp, Sengo, the former fleet admiral of the Marines, also steps into the fray. Sengo is a tactical genius and a powerful fighter in his own right. After consuming the Buddha fruit, Sengo can transform into a massive golden Buddha, granting him immense strength, size, and durability. In his Buddha form, Sengo becomes a living fortress, impervious to most conventional weaponry. Sengo's Haki further enhances his ability to combat the military's forces, allowing him to fight at the highest level and coordinate complex strategies to overwhelm the real-world forces. His sheer size and power enable him to destroy tanks and helicopters with ease, and his devastating attacks can obliterate entire battalions of soldiers. As Sengo joins the battle, the real-world military is left with few options to counter his might. Sengo's arrival on the battlefield signals the Marines' resurgence, as he provides the leadership and tactical acumen needed to organize the Marine forces into a cohesive unit. His ability to direct his subordinates and capitalize on their abilities allows the Marines to turn the tide in their favor. With Sengo leading the charge, the Marines' morale is boosted, and they begin systematically eliminating military positions with strategic precision. Despite the real-world military's technological advantage, Garp and Sengo's overwhelming power proves to be too much for them to handle. Fighter jets, tanks, and helicopters are no match for Sengo's Buddha form, which can withstand even the most powerful weaponry. Garp's fists can reduce entire battalions to rubble, rendering the military's infantry forces ineffective. The real-world military is also forced to contend with the Marines' advanced Haki abilities. While their weapons can cause damage, the Marines' use of armament Haki renders many attacks ineffective, as they can block gunfire or tank shells with ease. The military's reliance on technology, while effective against standard soldiers, is severely limited when facing beings of such overwhelming strength. At this point, the real-world military finds itself at a crossroads. While they still possess technological superiority, the Marines' legendary fighters, Garp and Sengo, prove to be overwhelming. The military is forced to retreat, re-evaluate their strategy, and seek reinforcements to deal with the unprecedented threat posed by these two legendary figures. Stage 5 marks a turning point in the battle, with the Marines' strongest fighters, Garp and Sengo, securing a decisive advantage for their side. Despite the real-world military's superior weaponry, the overwhelming strength, experience, and strategic prowess of these legendary figures prove to be too much. Garp and Sengo's presence on the battlefield not only turns the tide in favor of the Marines but also inspires their troops to fight with renewed vigor. In the end, Stage 5 concludes with the real-world military facing massive losses. While they still have technological superiority, the Marines' overwhelming power, led by Garp and Sengo, forces them to concede defeat. However, the battle is far from over, and the real-world military must now seek new strategies and reinforcements if they hope to stand a chance against the might of the Marines' elite fighters. As the battle progresses and the military is battered by the Marines' relentless onslaught, the real-world forces find themselves facing their greatest threat yet, the four admirals of the Marines. With their unparalleled strength, devastating devil fruit powers, and years of experience, the admirals are the ultimate force in the One Piece world, and their arrival signals the endgame of this colossal conflict. The military, now aware that conventional tactics and technology are no match for these superhuman warriors, resorts to its last-ditch effort, a nuclear strike aimed at decimating the Marines' leadership. However, the Admiral's abilities and coordination are more than a match for this final attempt, and they swiftly neutralize the nuclear threat, securing the Marines' victory. The four admirals, the top commanders in the Marines, each possessing immense power, are a sight to behold. Each admiral is a master of combat, possessing devastating devil fruit abilities that give them control over some of the most destructive forces in the world. Together, they form an indomitable unit that can lay waste to entire battalions, and their teamwork makes them even more dangerous. Akainu, Sakazuki, wielding the magma fruit, controls molten magma, a power capable of melting through anything in its path. Akainu's magma attacks are not only capable of destroying tanks and fortifications, but they can also incinerate large swaths of the battlefield, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. His power is particularly devastating against the real-world military's armored vehicles, as the molten magma easily melts through the toughest materials. Aokiji, Kazuki Kuzan, with the ice fruit, commands the power of ice. Aokiji's ability to freeze large areas of land and sea gives him immense control over the battlefield. He can freeze the real-world military's vehicles, structures, and even soldiers, rendering their weapons and technology useless. Aokiji's ice can also create defensive barriers that block attacks, protecting the Marines from airstrikes and artillery fire. Kizaru, Borsalino, who possesses the light fruit, is a being of pure light. His ability to move at the speed of light and unleash devastating laser beams makes him an unpredictable and lethal opponent. Kizaru can dodge incoming fire, fly above the battlefield, and strike from any direction. His lasers, fired from a distance, are capable of disintegrating enemy soldiers and machines alike. Fujitora, Isho, with the power of the gravity fruit, can control gravity itself. Fujitora's ability to manipulate gravitational forces allows him to crush the military's tanks, helicopters, and fighter jets with ease. He can create massive gravitational fields that disrupt the movement of enemy forces, forcing them into vulnerable positions. His attacks, often involving massive meteorites or giant pieces of Earth, are capable of leveling entire sections of the battlefield. Together, these four admirals form a nearly unstoppable force. Each of them possesses godlike powers that give them the ability to neutralize any technological advantage the real-world military might have had. The power of magma, ice, light, and gravity, when combined, creates an unrelenting storm of destruction that renders any resistance futile. Recognizing the overwhelming power of the admirals, the real-world military makes a desperate move. In a last-ditch effort to cripple the Marines and level the playing field, the military launches a nuclear strike aimed at eliminating the admirals and their leadership. The strike is a desperate gamble, a way for the military to use its ultimate weapon to neutralize the Marines' overwhelming strength. The nuclear missile is launched from a distant location, carrying the hopes of the real-world military. The idea is simple. A massive nuclear explosion will decimate the Marine leadership, particularly the four admirals, and wipe out their forces in one fell swoop. If successful, the strike could break the Marines' grip on the battlefield and provide the military with a chance at victory. However, the admirals, with their exceptional powers and teamwork, are more than prepared for this final gambit. As the missile hurtles toward the battlefield, the admirals spring into action as the nuclear missile approaches. Akainu, Aokiji, Kizaru, and Fujitora react with swift and coordinated precision. Each admiral utilizes their devil fruit powers in a strategic effort to neutralize the missile's threat and protect their forces. Akainu, with his magma abilities, positions himself at the forefront of the missile's trajectory. Using his magma to create a shield of molten rock, he absorbs the heat and energy of the explosion, preventing the nuclear blast from reaching the Marines. His magma serves as both a physical and heat-resistant barrier, nullifying the missile's destructive potential. Aokiji, with his ice powers, immediately creates a wall of ice between the missile and the Marines, further reducing the impact of the blast. The ice is thick and dense, capable of withstanding extreme temperatures, and its presence helps to protect both the Marines and the environment from the fallout of the explosion. Aokiji's control over the ice ensures that the nuclear blast is dampened, preventing the shockwave from causing widespread damage. Kizaru, utilizing his speed and light powers, moves into position to disarm the missile before it can hit its target. By moving at the speed of light, Kizaru is able to outrun the missile's trajectory and intercept it, redirecting its path with pinpoint accuracy. His lasers, fired from a distance, are capable of disabling the missile's propulsion system and redirecting its course, ensuring that it does not reach its intended target. Fujitora, with his gravity powers, creates a gravitational field that pulls the missile off its trajectory, altering its course and rendering it ineffective. His ability to manipulate gravity allows him to disrupt the missile's flight path and ensure that it never reaches the Marine's position. Fujitora's gravity manipulation can also crush the missile's components, preventing it from detonating in the first place. Through this coordinated effort, the four admirals successfully neutralize the nuclear strike, rendering the military's last-ditch attempt to defeat them utterly useless. The missile is diverted, disabled, or contained, and the Marines are spared from the catastrophic effects of the strike. This moment is a powerful testament to the Admiral's unparalleled abilities and their ability to respond to any threat with swift and decisive action. With the nuclear threat neutralized, the tide of the battle is decisively turned in favor of the Marines. The military's last attempt at victory has been thwarted, and the four admirals stand as the undisputed victors. Their combined strength, teamwork, and coordination are unparalleled, and no amount of modern technology can match the sheer destructive power they wield. The battle concludes with the real-world military in retreat, having been completely overwhelmed by the Marines' abilities. The Admiral's use of their devil fruit powers, combined with their haki and combat prowess, secures a decisive victory for the Marines. Despite the technological superiority of the military, it is clear that the Marines' supernatural abilities and legendary warriors are simply too powerful to overcome. The Marines' triumph demonstrates the superiority of their world's powers over modern military technology. While the military has advanced weaponry, it cannot compete with the sheer force and versatility of the Marines' devil fruit users and haki practitioners. In the end, it is the Marines' strategic brilliance and overwhelming might that lead them to victory, securing their place as the dominant force in this hypothetical battle. As the final stage concludes, the Admirals stand victorious, their power and teamwork having crushed the military's last hopes. The Marines have triumphed, proving once and for all that in a battle between modern technology and superhuman abilities, the latter holds the upper hand. The battle has been long, brutal, and filled with intense moments, but in the end, the Marines' victory is undeniable, and their place as the supreme force in this conflict is secured.